NAIDOC Week is on this week, an annual event to celebrate Australia's oldest living culture, but obviously the focus should be on closing the gap and eliminating disadvantage in some Aboriginal communities. To talk to us about this, we're joined by the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Karen Little. Karen, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Now, have you ever done the drive from Katherine to Nhulunbuy?
Well, I was actually born in the Northern Territory, so I've been in a lot of places in the Northern Territory that some of them aren't even on the map.
You've got to have a good place.
It is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place, and I encourage everybody to travel to the Northern Territory. It's a fantastic place to visit.
We use this term closing the gap a lot, and we know we're not achieving it. But I wonder where we need to start, because clearly everything we've done up to this point hasn't really... Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that, because there has been major advancements made in over the last, 3 or 4 or 5 decades. But there's still a lot of work to do. What's the first point in your view?
Look, as the former Shadow Minister for Prevention of Family Violence, I go back to, if you look at the 4 targets that are going in the wrong direction, one is incarceration, the other is children in out-of-home care, the other one is early childhood development, and the other one, sadly, is suicide. When you actually look at the statistics, the common factor in here is actually family violence, and we need to address that. We need to have conversations about the protective factors, which is about getting kids into school rather than on the streets, and actually getting parents into work and not on welfare. These are really important things that we must do to provide protective factors to everyone. And we must also celebrate the really good stuff like we are in NAIDOC Week, but there are great stories out there of success as well, and we should remember that. That's why I keep saying, whenever I get an opportunity, we really do need to focus our attention on the issues that matter most to those people who are most vulnerable in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community.
So, Senator, those things you talked about are not unique to Indigenous communities, though. Why are they more prevalent in Indigenous communities, based on the statistics?
Well, I think there are issues in there of where people live, how people live. I've seen just in the last couple of weeks some pretty significant infrastructure issues in remote communities. When your toilet breaks down in a city, it's generally fixed within a day or so, but in some of those remote places, it takes a while to get that stuff done, and we really do need to get better at servicing the infrastructure that also keeps people healthy. In Mutijulu a couple of weeks ago, they were saying they were building 10 new homes, but those homes were being built and just replacing ones that were so dilapidated. So they weren't adding to what is a growing community. And that's really important that we get our head around and our action around what's actually happening in communities now.
But how do we address the geographical realities? Because I know there's, connection to land and all of those kind of things, but there's no other country in the world that tries or actively tries to keep its Indigenous communities in, and I don't want to use the term dark ages, but I mean in a backward sense, if you know what I mean, rather than progressing them. And then we get to that point where, and you talk about those communities around Uluru there, you can't expect that there's going to be a fully functioning hospital or plumbers on call like there would be in a place where there's 500,000 or 1 million people, so to speak.
Well, if you look at some of these places that are quite remote, when they've actually grasped tourism and national parks, there are opportunities. What we need is more people to take up those opportunities, and we need to find a different way for people to actually be responsible for the things that are infrastructure that they have access to. I only this week I was very pleased to see the coroner's report from the Northern Territory and its many recommendations. Many of them focused on protective factors. Many of them focused on the drivers of people ending up in trouble, and in some cases quite dysfunctional. She talked about programs and assessments of children at a younger age so that there could be intervention to support them. She talked about things such as getting people into employment, in this case into the police force. She talked about community policing. She talked about a whole range of issues that I talk about often that are about providing the protective factors for people to actually live the best lives that they can.
A lot of these things sound like common sense though, Karen. Are they easy enough to implement?
Well, I get frustrated when people say this issue is so complex and that somehow means that it's harder to address. I think the failure of us often is that we apply a different standard, we apply different expectations, and I think that what we should say is every single dollar that gets spent on Indigenous Australians and the industry, because there is an industry that sustains this, is a dollar that we make sure is spent really effectively, and that we don't continue to spend more dollars. We should be spending less dollars the longer this goes on, not more. So we really need to be addressing a whole range of issues at the same time, but also stop doing what doesn't work and do more of what does, because there are some very good examples out there of things that are working really well.
Can that industry be dismantled?
Well, it's a massive industry, and I intend to do as much as I can to disrupt and dismantle it, because it's not as effective as it should be. And I'm not talking about Aboriginal community control services. I'm talking about all services that deliver to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. NIAA has been growing in staffing over the period of this Labor government, and yet there are over 1,000 service providers that they pay to do work on their behalf. I want to make sure that every dollar that is actually spent is accounted for, and it is not going to services that currently have so poor governance that they can't deliver what they need to deliver to the most vulnerable people.
Amen to that. Karen, appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Authorised by Karen Little, Liberal Party, Adelaide.